Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the improvements that we've been working on the past couple weeks, and that's creating both new deer trails along with enhancing existing deer trails. And we have made a few videos on this topic in the past with creating deer trails, travel corridors, steering tunnels, sidewalks, whatever you want to call them. And I do understand that when discussing whitetail habitat improvements, whether it's food plots, bedding areas, or in this case, deer trails, creating your own deer trails, a lot of times those main talking points do get repetitive. And so to try to avoid making the same video over and over again, we are going to talk about a few general concepts as it relates to creating deer trails, but this video is going to be a little bit shorter as we're going to try to tailor it to this property and kind of our thought process in creating the deer trails that we did so far on the property. And if you guys did want to check out the previous videos that we made where we're going to probably go into a little bit more detail into creating deer trails, I will link those above throughout this video. But this video in particular, we're going to be talking about the deer trails that we've made on this property and kind of why and where we place them again on this new property. But right off the bat here, we will be talking about a few general concepts as it relates to creating your own deer trails for those of you guys that might be either new to the channel or that might be new to working on whitetail habitat improvements on your property. The basic concept or idea behind it is we are trying to give the deer a nice, easy way to get from point A to point B. We're trying to give them a nice, easy path from one focal point on the property to another focal point on the property. And that could be anything. That could be from a bedding area to a bedding area. That could be from a food plot to a food plot. A lot of times it's from a bedding area to a food plot. We're trying to give those deer a nice, easy way to get from one area of the property to another. Or depending on the size of your property or how your property lays out, you might be connecting a bedding area that's off your property to a food source that's off your property in the other direction. You're going to give those deer a nice, easy way to get from point A to point B. For the most part, and there are always going to be exceptions, but for the most part, when traveling through an area, deer are going to take the path of least resistance when traveling from point A to point B, as long as they feel safe and secure. So what this means on your property, as long as the deer are unpressured, if you give those deer a nice, easy way from one focal point to another, there's a high probability that they're going to take that path. Now, in areas that are more heavily pressured or properties that are more heavily pressured, deer will likely take the safest route from point A to point B. So not always the easiest way, they're going to take the safest way. Survival is their top priority. So as long as you can keep your property pressure free, the deer will likely take the easiest route from point A to point B. And this is where creating your own deer trails comes in to create very predictable deer movement on your property. So with that in mind, let's now talk about what we did on this property to try to create some consistent deer movement that we can hunt during the fall. This past week, we created 3 different deer trails, and we are by no means close to done. We have so much more work to do as it relates to just creating deer trails, but we have to start somewhere. So we targeted a few areas to try to promote consistent deer movement. And we'll talk about each one of them now individually, as each one of the trails that we created kind of cuts through a different habitat type. The first 2 trails that we worked on, I expect to get a lot of use out of right away. The third trail that we created, not so much. But let's talk about the first trail that we created. And in this case, we likely just enhanced an existing trail. We have a low, wet, swampy section of our property that's not very wide, but it does stretch quite a ways north to south. And as the deer want to move through our property north to south, they're going to want to hug the edge of that low, wet, swampy ground. It's going to be a lot easier for the local deer herd as they try to move through our property north to south to hang just on the edge where it's a little bit drier, as opposed to trying to fight through the muck. Again, as long as they're unpressured. If they're unpressured, they're going to want to hang just on the edge. If they're more pressured in any given year, depending on our hunting pressure, neighboring hunting pressure, what have you, they will use that thick cover to move north to south. But by creating a trail just on the downwind side of that thick cover, you're going to be giving those deer a nice, easy way to move along that edge And this is already an area where there's most likely an existing trail, if not a heavily used trail, just on the downwind side of that thick cover as it transitions into open hardwoods. You're just trying to enhance the trail, give them a nice, easy path along an area that they already want to travel through. So again, how we determined we wanted to create a trail in this location, or more likely than not, enhance an existing movement pattern, was we noticed a very obvious edge. Not only was it an edge as a lowland swamp kind of transitioned into open hardwoods, we also had a lower area that was kind of at the base of a hill. So we had two kind of edges there. We had not only a topography edge, but we had a cover edge as well. And we kind of ran our trail right along the side of it. So now that we enhanced the trail, we made it much easier for the deer to move along that edge. We took what was already fairly predictable movement and made it much more predictable to help increase our hunting opportunities in the fall. The second deer trail that we just created, I also expect to get a lot of use out of right away. And this is one of your easier trails to create. And that's when you're creating a trail through very thick cover. Remember, deer want to take the path of least resistance. And if you can carve a path through very thick cover, there's a really good chance that that's the path that the deer are going to take when going from point A to point B, and that thick cover is right in the middle. How we decided we wanted that trail to move through the area was fairly simple. We are just trying to connect future improvements to one another through this thick area of our property, along with moving it past future stand locations. As far as the actual creation of the trail, whether you're trying to blaze a trail through thick cover, or with the first example, you're trying to cut a trail right along the edge of a thick swamp, the actual creation of the trail is no different. I curate them the same. For the most part, I'm just trying to create a trail that I can walk down comfortably. And I use my kids as a guide. My son has a little ATV, and my daughter has taken over my son's old electric John Deere tractor. And for me, as long as they can get up and down these trails with that ATV, with that electric tractor, then that's perfect. If they can get up and down these trails with no problem, then a deer should be just fine. And how I'm actually making the trail is also very simple. The first thing I'm doing is I'm just walking up and down the future trail with the chainsaw, just kind of getting any big sticks, logs, maybe down trees out of the way. Because the second thing that I'm doing is I'm just taking my riding lawnmower, dropping the deck, turning the mower on, and then driving through, creating the new path. Now, depending on the area, I'm not always able to do it this way, depending on the terrain, how wet the area is. I'm not always able to create trails this way, but for the most part, this is how I create the deer trails. In this property, how we created the trails on this new property was no exception. The third deer trail that we made just cuts through open hardwoods. So because there's not really any edge, because there's not really any habitat features that are going to force or push the deer into this one location, that's the reason that I don't expect the deer to use this trail as much as those other ones. However, because we did cut a trail through the open hardwoods, we kind of put the trail down to bare dirt, I do expect the deer to take this path, more often than they did before. And the more deer that we can get to take that path, the more that's going to tell other deer in the area to also take that path. Every time a deer walks, it's depositing scent from a gland in between its toes. So the more that we can get a deer to take that trail, the more scent is being left on that trail. It's also going to tell other deer take that trail, again, compounding the amount of scent that's being left on that trail. And this trail eventually is going to be the north end of a food plot. So I just want to try to reinforce that this is the way that you're going to be getting from point A to point B in the future as you work around the north edge of a food plot. So right now, do I expect that this is going to be a major trail that the deer are going to be using on our property? No. But because I know there's going to be a certain improvement, a new edge in that area in the future, I do want to try my best to try to condition the local deer herd to use this path as they move across my property from one side to the other. So when that improvement is put in, there won't be that big of a change to their existing pattern as they work along that edge. But guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on talking about the 3 new trails that we just put in on this property. Hopefully it was cool to see the deer using the trails that we just put in this past week. If you guys do have any questions on creating deer trails or questions in general, please leave those in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.